I'm the Director of Consumer Credit Counseling Service of Northeastern Iowa. In an effort to bring more information to the public, we at Consumer Credit present 2 credit education programs each month on KBBG Radio. They're on the first and third Tuesdays of each month from 10:30 to 11 a.m. on KBBG 88.1 on the FM dial. This is a call-in program, so feel free to call in 234-1441 with your questions. Let me start by thanking Lou and Bev and the KBBG team for allowing us this opportunity to be with you to help you answer your credit and debt questions. Today we're going to continue the discussion of renting, knowing the rules of renting, deposit requirements, what to expect as a tenant, and being successful as a tenant. My guest is Jane Reppes, a local landlord and a good friend. Call 234-1441 and ask questions or give opinions on renting and credit topics related to renting. So let's start this morning with a question, and these questions we have received as landlords. Why do I have to fill out an application?
The landlord wants to know who you are and if you have the financial backing to rent that particular unit. It's in your best interest that you have it, and it's in the landlord's best interest that you have it. There's other information on there that they want to know as well.
The landlord doesn't know you at all, and this is their way. There's a secondary reason for having it. What if something happens to you? Who does the landlord call? If he has no application, the only thing he can do is call the police department and tell them, handle it. But if he has an application, you would have put on there your closest relative or a friend with their phone numbers, their addresses, so they're local. The landlord can call them and say, Jane fell down the steps and needs somebody over here right away. Before you involve the police or any other thing, they can get a friend there, and that makes the transition, whatever you need, whether it's a hospital or the police or anything, easier. So don't think that the application is strictly for the landlord. People say they don't have all the information called for on the application. Well, you have to search yourself and come up with the answers. Landlords that I know aren't going to bother checking an application if it's either partially filled out or filled out with just a name.
It's an automatic screening device. If you don't fill out that application completely, the landlord's not even going to be looking at you probably.
And that's just one way of saying, I don't really care. I'm going to take the time to do it so I can say I was here, but I don't really care if I get it or not. You need to be serious about applying. What should you do if you have criminal activity in your background? When I say that, I'm referring to drug arrests or convictions or anything like that. From my own experience, what I want is honesty.
Yes, that matters a lot. I have on my application, you can't have 5 or more moving violations with your car. And you may want to know, how is that related to getting an apartment? It means you don't follow rules. And if you don't follow rules, then I'm really not interested in you.
It's very interesting, and that's one thing I noticed. The application includes a section which says that I can pull your criminal background. I go to Iowa Courts Online. Iowa Courts Online gives you all that information. And if I see people that have multiple arrests, that have been arrested for things like domestic abuse, things that could concern me as a landlord, I don't want any part of them. Now, if it is a single instance and they explain to me and are forthcoming in the application, well, this happened, it's going to be on there, but that's when this was in my life and this is what was going on. I won't deny them an apartment. I won't necessarily give them the apartment, but they may get it, and I may let them know I'm just waiving it because of that.
Mhm.
We're fair people.
And there are, extenuating circumstances sometimes, and not every rule is an absolute.
That's right. And landlords were at one time tenants too.
Oh, yes.
And we have either happy or not so happy memories as well.
And when you hear about landlord stories, how many times do you hear about the great landlord? No, if you have a story to tell, it's about a bad circumstance that you had. So it's always wise to ask a few questions when they say that landlord's awful, that I didn't get my deposit back. I know that I had a girl wrote me a very nasty letter because she didn't get her deposit back. But neither did she pay her last month's rent or clean.
Yes. And I want to cover this section on deposit. I think maybe we'll move ahead on that. A landlord asks for a deposit much the same as the reason he asks for an application. A deposit is something of a guarantee that the unit will be as good when you move out as when you move in. I can't tell you the number of people that said, well, I don't think it was that good to start with. If it's good enough for you to start with, that means it's rentable, that means it's clean, neat, etc. If not, you have no business accepting it.
You can refuse to accept it.
Yes. Once you accept it, it has got to be returned clean and damage-free.
And if you want to guarantee that, take some pictures.
Yes.
It's a wise decision. You certainly should have some kind of a written move-in record, and go ahead and take as many pictures as you want. The landlord may also have taken pictures.
Yes, having these pictures in the beginning shows what the unit was like. For instance, if you have a rug burn on the floor and it's very noticeable, take a picture of it and make sure your picture is dated. When you go to move out, if the landlord says you put this rug burn here, you can say, oh, wait a minute. Here's a picture when I moved in, and you have to file these and keep them on hand.
Yes.
It's not good enough to take a picture and forget where it is, because when you move out, you're gonna need it.
It's wise to have a folder where you put everything about your rental agreement. It's the lease, it's the move-in record, it's your pictures. It's just good business sense to have that, and creates less friction when you need that information.
Yes, and there is a saying at the top of our leases, ink is much better than the best of memories. And that is so true, because we remember things in different ways. And our memories are all part of who we are.
And that landlord wants to give you the deposit back. It's so much easier. Just think, if I can give the deposit back, it means you paid all of your rent, you paid it on time, you didn't damage anything, and you cleaned it up when you got ready to leave. That saves me a lot of time. I mean, that's what I want, and I assume you want your money. So we have a mutual agreement here that we both want something, and it would be nice to each of us deliver it to the other one.
It's absolutely wonderful to be able to walk in an apartment where someone has moved out of, and everything is clean and neat, and the rent is paid in full. And the last thing, they have given me the address to send the letter to.
A written address.
A written address. It must be in writing. It is not good enough to say, oh, by the way, I moved to 100 Cornwall and just send it over whenever you have time. How am I going to remember?
And I heard a judge speak at a state landlord meeting who said, just propping it up on the kitchen table, your piece of paper with your address on, is not good enough. The cleaning lady may come in and move it. You have to give it to the landlord.
And that's pretty simple for the deposit you want back, because deposits are typically $400 or better. So if you want $400, you need to do something to get it. But if the landlord, and if you don't give the landlord a written deposit, he doesn't have to start the 30-day period he has to give back your deposit. Now, what most of us do, because so many tenants do not do that, they don't give us the written notice. What most of us do is send that deposit notice to the last known address, which is going to be the apartment that we own that you lived in, When it comes back to us as addressee unknown, we put it in your file. If somebody comes back and says, you never notified me, well, here it is, postmarked within 30 days. You didn't give me a deposit address, or an address for the deposit. If you're giving it to me now, my 30 days start now.
Yes, and that's essential to remember to do that. Take an envelope and address it and hand it to the landlord. It's an easy way.
Yes, and these are not our rules as landlords. These are state of Iowa rules as they govern landlords. That's what gives us the date and number of days, the with eviction, with deposit return, and all of those. And another thing, when you are moving out, make sure you know where you're moving. Check that out. I've had people move out and then all of a sudden, I don't have a place to live. Now what am I gonna do? Because they weren't sure. So make sure you know where you're moving. Then you must give the landlord a 30-day notice. That means if you're gonna be out April 1, you must give the notice March 31st. No, February 28th. So that your full month of March, the landlord has to seek someone. And you need to be willing to allow the landlord to show the apartment. He has to give you, he or she has to give you a 24-hour notice. And they would give you the reason.
And they can give you a shorter notice if you agree.
Yes.
And it's reasonable. I always tell my prospective tenants, go ahead and have a look and walk in the bedroom and whatnot, because the people who rented it also did that when they were looking at a house. So just remember, when you're looking for a house, how you wanted to see the new apartment. Let the new people come and see your house.
Yes, and in the discussion of damages with regard to your damage deposit, people will tell me, well, I didn't damage this, but, you know, my friends did, or my friends' kids did. Well, it goes like this. You're responsible for your damage deposit. If something happens and it reduces your deposit, that money is the landlord's to keep. It's up to you to get the money back from the people who did the damages. You're becoming a collection agent. It may be the end of your friendship, but this is the way it is. The landlord does not go to your friend to collect for damages.
No, you have to do that. And they may have done something as serious as kicking your door. You'd be surprised how big the bill gets very quickly with a kicked-in door. So let your friends know, you know, this kind of behavior is not allowed around your house because it's going to cost you.
In the past, I have fixed broken doors. And I finally came to the conclusion when they call and say, oh, my door got broken down, now what am I going to do? My response is, I will get a contractor and find out what it's going to cost. You start looking for the money. I get the deposit, I get the estimate from the contractor, including the door, give it to the tenant gives me the money, the contractor is hired and puts the door in. I'm not putting the money out anymore. And if it's not done, guess what? You've got a problem.
No. We're in this together, and we need to work together. You need to do your part, and we really need to do our part. And working together, we end up with a nice place for you to live, and then, because we want a nice place, we want our property to stay in good condition, and you want a nice place to live, so we can work together.
We pay for the water bill in the apartments. I have gotten $500 and $600 water bills for 3 months. And when I call the waterworks, they'll say, well, you must have something leaking. When we go to see the tenants, well, yeah, this has been kind of running for a while. It's no longer a leak, it's a run. That's why I got the big water bill. So one of the things you as tenants can do is, if something is happening like that, get a hold of your landlord right away. They don't want the bill. They want to get that taken care of, and it's far better on the faucets when it's not dripping all the time.
when you go to pay your rent on the first of the month, look around and see if there are any faucets that are dripping, or a toilet that runs, or anything else that you see, and use it as a kind of a reminder to look around your place and report to your landlord anything that's going on that needs fixing.
Yes. The question, when can the landlord come into the apartment or the house when you're not there? For emergencies,
And that's governed by the state law.
yes it is. So let's say, I got a letter the other day that wants the gas meters changed. Well, all 4 of the apartments have gas stoves. So I will try to arrange a time for them to go out. But as far as when they're gonna go in each unit, I don't know. So I would give them permission or go over with them, and we would go into each unit and relight the stoves. So that's an emergency situation, or.
A broken water pipe.
Yes.
And they're not home, so you go in and start taking care of it.
Yes. When I have someone go into an apartment and we haven't given a 24-hour notice, they leave a notice on the table of why they came in. In other words, it had to be for some kind of an emergency thing, but that is also kind of questionable. So if it's something, maybe a window was open or it was broken and that was taken care of, we just put it on there, we did this. Because I want to be upfront with the tenant, like I asked them to be upfront with me, and let them know we came in for that purpose.
Again, that's working together, and you'll both be happier.
Yes. When I first got into rental property in the late 70s, it was strictly a partnership. People rented until they could buy. People rented if it fit them. They paid in full on the first. And then, back then, it was cash. In full on the first, in cash. It was wonderful. Then as years went by, people have more and more likes. They want bigger units. It's more important what kind of a stereo set or what kind of a telephone they have than whether or not the rent's paid. And their phones sometimes are $300 and $400. So it's kind of gone topsy-turvy, but really your rental, the place that you live at, is the most important thing in your expenses.
Yeah, you need a roof over your head, so you organize your rent payment first.
And that takes us back to budgeting. When you have a job, out of every weekly check should come a certain amount that you put in an envelope for your rent, or you have in your bank account for your rent. So that when the end of the month comes and you're ready to pay next month's rent, it's all there. It's not, I can pay you $150 and can I bring you in $150 next week, and it's being dribbled out all month long.
You knew when you signed the agreement when the rent was due, and you should plan for that. Now, if something comes up, like you get a different job and you're paid every 2 weeks, talk to your landlord. Some landlords will let you pay the rent in halves and pay it every 2 weeks. Just talk to them and see if they agree to that.
Yes, communication is number one. The state changed the law regarding the late payment fee this last year. It's now $12 a day for the first 5 days you're late. My tenants have 5 days to pay their rent, and I don't charge anything. But on day 6, it's an extra 12. I'm not so concerned about getting it all on the first, although if I was a better business person, I certainly would be. I want people to be happy in the apartment and renting it. So if it's gonna take them till the 7th or the 8th to get me the rent for the month, and then I get it all, that's cool. I don't worry about it.
Yeah, you look at the rental relationship. Do they like your place? I love them to like my place, because then I'll take better care of it. It's a home. It's not just a place to live in for a while. It's a home. And if a person is making a real true effort and taking good care of the property, I don't want to lose that person.
Yes, that's the same way I feel, and the longer they stay, the better. That's good for, not only for the tenant and the landlord, but it's good for the furnishings in the apartment, because there's less wear and tear when the same people are in the unit than when they're in and out, in and out, in and out.
that makes quite a difference. I read to students, so they used to move every year. Now, because there are so many of them, there are so many options to rent, they tend to stay year after year. And maybe 2 of them move out and 2 of them stay and form a new group. Well, I really appreciate those people staying over. They already know all the rules. They know what I expect. I remember listening to a speaker at a state convention who said sometimes managers get bonuses for every new renter they get. He said, I would give bonuses for every renter they keep, because it's much better for the building not to having people moving in and out, in and out. And if you think you need a new place to live, maybe you had a baby and you don't have enough room, ask your landlord first. If they have something, if you're happy with your landlord, keep him. He may have another place that suits you just fine.
Yes, I have had that happen to me, which has been really nice. And I've also had to tell people, sorry, I don't have anything any bigger. But that is the type, because they know when to pay you, they know how to handle it. They've really learned. But I would hope that anybody that rents from us knows when they go on to the next landlord what to expect and how to behave.
Yes, you don't want a negative report following you, because the landlord will call a former landlord to see what you were like. The question is, would you rent to them again? You don't want that to be a no.
Let's talk about getting the deposit back. We've already discussed knowing that you have a new apartment and knowing when you're going to move and making sure that you give the landlord the 30-day notice. Cleaning. Your landlord should have a how to clean unit form. And this is very detailed. It has room by room things to do to make sure it's cleaned. I had a young person renting from me, wasn't that young, in her 20s. And when I went over to look at this efficiency apartment, there were a few things that weren't done, like the refrigerator, freezer was not defrosted. Those of you who don't know what defrosting is, that's kind of an old freezer. Anyway, and I told her, and also the stove, the oven hadn't been cleaned. So I saw her in the store, and I mentioned those to her, and she said, well, how do you defrost a freezer? Okay, so that meant that it hadn't been touched for the last year. And when we moved the couch, which was furnished, there was a can of beans holding up the back of it. So apparently they broke a leg off and they stuck a can of beans underneath to hold it up. So some of these things you laugh at and you just say, oh my, people have things to learn.
I'd rather they just talk to me directly. Like if the window gets broken, tell me how it got broken and how you're going to take care of it. Don't make up something and try and tell me, because I'll know that you're not telling the truth. And you know that I know you're not. Let's just be efficient. You say what you did, you find a way to take care of it, and it's done.
Yes, and it's something like a window we see. And we know how it was yesterday. And then when you see the tape across it or something, you know somebody had a problem. So why weren't you called?
Yes, we want to know when there's damage to our apartment. We don't want it to go unfixed. The unit begins to deteriorate very rapidly if you never fix anything.
I had a tenant call me, and I still kind of feel sorry for the tenant. He got an animal in his apartment, and he asked me what he should do. Well, I'm not going to go over and catch an animal in your apartment. So I asked him if he called the Humane Society, and they said they don't deal with it. So it's almost like, and this is the second floor, I don't know how they would have gotten up there. So sometimes we face things, and the animal did finally crawl out, but fixing screens, that was not a tenant's problem. He didn't do anything to it, and it wasn't a friend of his.
Well, there are some things that the landlord hasn't fixed, and maybe you've asked for and it hasn't been fixed. There is a procedure that you can use to do that. If you look up in landlord-tenant law for Iowa, it says you can give your landlord a notice to fix something in writing, and it has to be something like you don't have heat, or you don't have water, or the door doesn't lock right. It can't be like a little tiny thing. And you tell the landlord that you are expecting that to be fixed within 7 days, or you'll fix it yourself and take the money off the rent. You can't just take money off the rent to fix something if you haven't done the formal letter.
So do the letter, and then if the time limit goes by and it's not done, and it's a minor thing like this, and you can do it correctly, do it, attach a copy of the bills to a letter when you send your rent in, showing that you took the, whatever it was, $40 off or whatever to get this paid. And there should be no problem with your rent. That is not grounds for eviction, because you pay for something. That should have been taken care of. But if you don't send that letter beforehand and give the landlord time to clear it up, it could. A judge in the court would take care of it and hope, and I believe that he would rule in favor of yours, but you're not doing it correctly if you don't give him the notice.
In like fashion, he can ask you, give you a 7-day notice for something.
That's right.
Like if you've got a new dog and the lease says no pets, he can send you, this is a violation of the lease, and you have 7 days to get rid of it. And he'll come and check in 7 days. And if it's gone, fine. If it doesn't, he can give you a 3-day notice to leave. Or if you have sent the dog away and then you sneak it back in, within 6 months of that notice, if he has to give you a second notice that you have violated the lease on the same thing, he can terminate the lease.
You don't have 7 days that time.
No.
That is the end. And that's the way it has to be. Rules have to be rules, and they're good for all of us. And the discussion of rent takes us again back to the budget. We need to know what we have for housing expenses. If your rent includes utilities, this is a winter to be happy you are where you are.
For sure.
If it does not, and you're paying your utilities separately, you're really hurting, and I know it. So look at your budget, and if you have anything extra, put it away for next month's utility bill, or make sure that money is available.
And some utility company will let you go on a budget plan where you can pay the same amount every month. And then sometime during the year, they settle up if one side owes the other one money. But that's a good thing to do to help avoid those high peaks in the winter.
Yes, it's always good to, number one, know your budget, to know where the variances are. Insurance is a variance, but it's a very important one. If you are renting an apartment, and especially when we read about fires that we've been seeing, we've been reading about in the paper, or some of this water damage, have insurance coverage on your personal belongings so that you won't get into a situation like that. So, and just like your house payment, your rent is number one in your budget. You make sure that you have your housing and your food and your gas for your car, which you're going to need this time of year. Have all those things there. If you need assistance with your budget, call us at Consumer Credit Counseling, 234-0661, or stop at 1003 West 4th Street in Waterloo. Call for an appointment, and a counselor will sit down and go over your budget with you and help you make any adjustments you need. Thank you again, Jane, for joining me this morning.
It's fun to be here.
Take care. You have a good day.
That went fast.
It did, very fast.
Oh my gosh.
And there was no nervousness in anything.
Oh, there's something I want to ask you. What happens if you have a fire or a flood and it floods your apartment? What does the state law say about what you can do, the tenant?
I don't know if the state law says anything, but I thought you had to put them up at a hotel for that 30-day period.
I remember this happened to me years ago. and they had 30 days, and I used to see it in landlord tenant law, they have 30 days to put it back in living order. And if they can't fix it within 30 days, then your lease can end. Otherwise, the rent continues. Well, I thought it was still that way. It's not.